Hey everyone, it's Allie, and today is day 1 of season 1.0. Now, I wanted to make a very quick video that's going to go over all the things that we've discovered on day 1 about Shadow Dagger Falconer. Now, with this actually being released, we can finally theorycraft and test some things that we weren't fully sure and certain about, and we can finally fully talk about all these things and see how it changes anything for a build. So the first thing I want to say is that this build blew all of my expectations out of the water. At first, I wasn't sure how comfortable immediately swapping to Aerial Assault is going to be, given you only had 4 passive points, but oh my god, did it work out, and it felt so good to begin with. What I ended up deviating a tiny little bit from what I put in the build guide is I immediately put 1 point to Twilight Strike, 1 point to Plume Daggers, and then immediately picked up Skyward Swoop. In the build guide, I did mention to put 3 points into Twilight Strike first, but personally I wanted to see how does 1 point in Skyward Swoop immediately feel before more points in Twilight Strike, and it felt really good. Realistically, it's a minor thing, as you're going to get XP so quickly that you're going to be able to get the 2 points in Twilight Strike in basically 2 seconds. But no matter what, this felt incredible to swap to immediately, and it absolutely teared through Monolith. Through the rest of this video, I'm going to show you some day 1 footage of me playing it, and oh my god, it just felt so good. It's so difficult for me to convey in words just how good this build felt to clear with. For bossing, it did some pretty respectable bossing damage. Now, it didn't do insane amounts of bossing damage, but it felt really fun to play on bossing, simply due to Aerial Assault having such a low cooldown, affecting you, making you feel like you could jump around the whole boss arena with no problems. It just felt like you had so much mobility in the build, and because you have such high base movement speed, and because you basically permanently have haste, it just makes it feel so fluid. If you haven't played this build, it's hard for me to actually just convey to you how good this build feels to play. But if you've played it, I'm sure you felt it for yourself, which is how amazing the build overall feels. So with that said, I am so happy with the performance of this, and I'm so excited to see how it keeps scaling into mid-game, into end-game, and how we can push some corruption with this pretty far. Now, with that out of the way, what I want to talk about are some things about Umbral Blades that we discovered. So the first thing to mention here is that you do not need Twilight Assault. At first, I wasn't sure if you needed Twilight Assault to be able to have 3 blades from your Twilight Strike actually proc, because from all the footage that we've had of Falconer, it always made it look like you always had 3 Umbral Blades through your Blade Storms active at any time, and then the other 3 immediately exploded due to explosive blades. Now, we didn't know specifically if that was done with Twilight Assault or not, but now that we can test in game, we can confirm that you do not need Twilight Assault to actually make that work. The other thing to point as well is that you do not need both Lethal Darkness, and you do not need to have both Plume Daggers. You can pick either or. You don't actually need to have both these points, and you can just drop 1 and 2, as they basically are redundant. The final thing to mention, because we don't need Twilight Assault, and well, I didn't really realize this, how valuable this actually is in the setup, is Loathing. Loathing, in our case, with the Aerial Assaults just randomly throwing the Blade Storms all over the place and not necessarily fully targeting enemies with them. Typically, it will fully target enemies, but sometimes your Falcon will just randomly throw them. The Loathing makes it substantially easier for your Blade Storms to hit whatever you want, especially while clearing, giving you substantially better clearing. Typically, I've not been a fan of Loathing because the slowly stick enemies really meant it was very, very slow and just didn't feel that good, but actually ends up feeling pretty good, and I would highly recommend for you to pick up Loathing immediately. Now, the final thing I want to mention about skills, which I am not 100% sure, but this is something that I kind of discovered at the end of today, which is going to require testing into tomorrow to see if it's actually true, but it seems like Caltrops, for some reason, is benefiting Skyward Swoop. That means that every single time the Caltrops are on the ground, which do taking damage every second or so, they also benefit the 10% of cooldown recovered on Falcon hit for some reason. At least that's what it felt like to me when I was doing the Reign of Dragons boss. It felt like my Aerial Assaults were coming up substantially faster than they ever have before, and the only thing I could attest to this was simply just due to his hitbox being so big that it was consistently getting hit by all the Caltrops. If this is true, that's a really big DPS increase for bosses, because we're going to be spamming nets, and then we're going to be getting Caltrops from the net as well, and because these presumably are going to be the same exact Caltrops as the ones dropped from Aerial Assault, that means that the mass amounts of Caltrops we drop from net also get to benefit this. Again, I'm not sure. I need to do more testing of this to see if this is actually the case or not. Now, the next thing I want to mention, which I didn't really portray very well in any of the guides so far, is what to actually do with your Runes of Ascendance. Your Runes of Ascendance, especially this early in the season, are very powerful for this build. Ideally, we want to get ourselves a Cradle of the Erased, and Cradle of the Erased has around a 10% chance to be spawned in existence through a Rune of Ascendance. The other thing to mention as well is if you are playing a Circle of Fortune, the second tier, which you get very quickly, this took me only 2 additional echoes to actually unlock tier 2, gives you a 45% chance for Runes of Ascendance to be preserved, meaning you effectively have 1.5 Runes of Ascendance for every Rune of Ascendance you actually get. Meaning that with it only being a 1 in 10 chance of you getting a Cradle of the Erased through Runes of Ascendance, it's really easy for you to get one that way. You should be saving all of your Runes of Ascendance specifically to use on random shields to turn into Cradles. Now, I want to mention here that nothing matters when you do this. Nothing matters. Your level doesn't matter. The area level doesn't matter. The shield base doesn't matter. The shield level doesn't matter. All a Rune of Ascendance cares about is that you put a shield in the crafting window, no matter what the shield is, and then you use the Rune of Ascendance, and it'll just randomly give you a shield, and it'll be weighted. So I would highly recommend to do that. And even once you do get a cradle, I would recommend to keep using your Runes of Ascendance on more shields to get more cradles, just due to the fact that you are going to want to eventually get a really good cradle due to it having weavers, meaning that the weavers might potentially give you something garbage or something really good. So you just want to keep making more cradles until you get a decent cradle with decent weavers on it. Now, if you do need some shields, a really easy way of getting more shields is just come to the gambler, go over to armor, and just buy whatever shields that you can from here. It's really easy to get quite a few of this way, and personally, I've been stockpiling them in my stash just to have them ready to go for whenever I get myself a Rune of Ascendance to immediately try to get myself a cradle. Now, the final thing I want to mention here, which is a very minor oopsie on my part, I'm sorry, and some of you might have noticed it so far, is that my loot filter didn't actually include shields in it. Again, I'm sorry, that's completely my fault. I have added shields into the loot filter, and the loot filter is updated, and there will be a link to it in the description below if you want to see shields. Again, super sorry. I don't know how I missed putting shields in the loot filter. With all that said, cuties, that's everything we have to talk about in this video. If you have any further questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments below, or feel free to come on my Twitch and either watch me play it live if you want to see how it's done, or if you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer them for you live. Other than that, cuties, I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day. I hope to see you on Twitch if you do want to come by, and I'll see you cuties in the next video.